Hey there, welcome back to another video. This time around, it is my review of Season 1 of The Boondocks. Now, before I get around to sharing more of my thoughts on this show, I would like to give a special shout out to Shine for requesting this review. And if there's another TV show, film, or topic that you would personally like to see me discuss in the future, feel free to donate to either my PayPal or to my Patreon. The link to both is in the video description down below, and I will try to get to your request as soon as I possibly can. Now, The Boondocks is one of those shows that, at least for the first couple seasons, still stands to this day as one of the best shows that ever aired on television. The first two seasons of this show are honestly some of my favorite works of television and animation. The third season, not so much. It's more of a mixed bag, but it's still watchable, and I can still have some fun with it. The fourth season, though, is an absolute dumpster fire. But the first two seasons are incredible. And after revisiting the first season, it just makes me love the best that this show has to offer even more. This is the best example of a show that I can think of that has a unique perspective on culture and society, that has something to say about society but isn't overly preachy, and a show that, despite all of this and its heated themes and the political commentary, it's still incredibly entertaining. So it's not a show that, despite its political leanings, despite its willingness to have a fair amount of subtext, it's not dull. And it just makes the show so much more special because it says a lot of things about society, and there's a lot of things about it that are mentioning certain parts of not just black culture, but just culture and society in general, that I think a lot of people can connect with. And it really does make you think. Every episode makes you think in some way or another about certain aspects of society, but not in a way where it's boring or you feel like you're being lectured to. And that's something that is incredibly difficult to pull off, especially as consistently and as effectively as the best episodes of this show manage to do. Now, it's based on a comic series of the same name called The Boondocks by Aaron McGruder. It was, I think it was like a web comic at one point, but it was also in print in select markets, and it got enough traction that Magruder was actually able to obtain financing for a pilot episode, and he got the financing for the pilot episode and pitched it to Fox after it was completed, and Fox just didn't feel like it was right for their network, and that ultimately led to Cartoon Network deciding to take a chance on the show for their adult programming block, Adult Swim. And that's where I first discovered this show. I was just watching Adult Swim late one night, and it came on, and I honestly had not heard of it until that night. And I was just thoroughly engrossed and entertained by the one episode that I saw. It was the uh, uh, kidnapping Oprah episode. Like that's the first episode of the show that I saw, and I was like, this is great. I want to see more of this, and it then became a show that I actually would actively watch on Cartoon Network whenever I had the chance. And there's just so much about this show that is great and still holds up to this day. Aaron McGruder's passionate involvement with it is a big reason why this show works as well as it does. It's a very personal show for him. A lot of his beliefs, a lot of the things that he feels are problematic about society or black culture, are things that are put to the forefront when it comes to this show, but in a way that doesn't come across like it's forced. It really does feel like this is coming from the heart. And there is a lot of heart and soul to the show too, which I think is pretty underrated. It's a big reason why this first season, in my opinion, is so good, is because it does have a fair amount of heart and soul to it. It's not just social commentary and over the top dark comedy and dark satire. Like there's more to it than that, and that really does speak to the quality of the writing, which there were multiple different writers throughout the, the 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 series, let alone the first season. And all of them did a great job in terms of incorporating social commentary, as well as the different character bits and moments of depth for individual characters. In a lot of ways, it really is structured like a sitcom, but it's done in a way that's legitimately clever and doesn't feel like it's just rehashing sitcom cliches all the time. And the voice cast is absolutely stellar. I mean, you got Regina King, who voices Huey and Riley Freeman, and she manages to bring out distinct personalities and voice inflections out of the two of them in ways that is just absolutely tremendous. When you think about it, it's mind blowing. It still blows my mind that she voiced both these characters because she did such a good job believably making it sound like these are two different voice actors. That isn't just her doing the voice work for both of them because they sound completely different from one another. And John Witherspoon is wonderful. He's just so damn good in this. Playing Granddad. It's honestly some of his finest work. And you can tell that he's having a lot of fun playing the role. And it just makes it just a really uh, um, wonderful and just great standout voice performance that still stands the test of time after all these years. And you've got Gary Anthony Williams, who voices Uncle Ruckus, and Uncle Ruckus is a very difficult character because this is a very controversial character, and the way that he handles this character, though, in terms of the voice work, is nothing short of impeccable. Like it's just really great work um, by this actor in terms of still managing to showcase the comedic elements of this character while also showing the more sinister side of this character, who in a lot of ways really is the antagonist of the series and of the season. So you got Cedric Yarborough as well from Reno 911, who voices this DA or lawyer named Tom, and he's good in it in terms of playing this guy who in a lot of ways is very shy, very naive. Does a good job really portraying those aspects of that character. And Jill Talley was good in the little bits that she had as the voice of Sarah, Tom's wife. Gabby Soleil was really strong as the voice of Jasmine, the daughter of Tom and Sarah, who is actually really close friends with Huey. And yeah, it's a little girl that she voices, but she does it in a way that sounds legitimate. It sounds legit. It doesn't sound like, oh, it's an adult just trying to sound like a little girl. And there's other voice work that's done by a multitude of different other actors who have little cameo roles throughout the season, like Ed Asner, who voices Ed Wunsler, this rich asshole, and Ed Asner is just excellent in that role. You have Charlie Murphy and Samuel L. Jackson, who voice Ed Onler III and Gin Rummy. You've got Cat Williams, who voices a pimp, Adam West, who voices R. Kelly's lawyer. You've got Terry Crews, who voices a health inspector. Mos Def and Sway guest stars themselves. Well, actually, no, Sway guest stars as himself. Mos Def voices Gangstalicious. You got Quincy Jones, plays himself in one episode. Judge Reinhold voices Mr. Uberwitz, a teacher at Huey and Riley's school. You've got Exhibit, who voices himself for Pimp My Ride parody. John C. McGinley voices the White Shadow, who may or may not be a schizophrenic hallucination coming from the mind of Huey Freeman. Kevin Michael Richardson voices Martin Luther King. You've got Rob Paulson, who's been in a ton of other animated projects throughout the years. He voices Riley's art teacher in one episode, who was a parody of Bob Ross. You've got Mike Epps, who voices Mo Jackson, who's an old friend of Robert Freeman's from back during the time of World War II. And you've got other aspects of the show that also make it definitely something that really leaves quite an impression. The soundtrack is one of them for sure. Like the opening theme by Asheru, which is a remixed version of a song by Asheru called Judo Flip, is honestly one of the best intro themes to any show out there. It does a great job getting you excited and pumped to watch the show. It fits the tone of the show really well. You also have some other reoccurring bits of music. Maybe recurring isn't the right word, but you get other bits of music from various different sort of artists, hip hop artists mostly, that are incorporated into the show and this season in a very effective fashion. And then you have a score that's a little understated, a little in the background, but still provides a good amount of atmosphere to a given episode. And each episode features some pretty, I wouldn't say pretty, I think it features some great direction by pretty much anyone that's picked to direct a particular episode. And for 15 episodes, there could be a tendency for there to be some filler episodes or ones that aren't really that great, but there is honestly only 2 episodes out of this entire season that I would consider to be maybe close to filler material or stuff that I just, kind of liked okay and I found to be average or adequate, but not really on to par with the quality of the other episodes. And that's quite an accomplishment for any show, because there isn't a single episode that I thought was downright terrible or unwatchable. And a good reason for that is just the animation. I love the way this show is animated. It's a really cool contemporary, at least for the time, take on anime when it comes to the style of animation. There's even the same sort of stylistic approach for the action in the show when there are sequences of action. There's a whole sequence that is a dream sequence where Huey is dreaming that he's a part of some kind of anime or a story where he's fighting a blind swordsman, and the way that was set up was just gorgeous in terms of the animation. And the animation itself in many ways is very much a character in this show. It adds so much extra character and charm to the series and just really adds a hell of a lot in the long run to this season and the seasons that would come afterwards. Now, the first episode is called The Garden Party, and this one establishes a setting and establishes the characters. It's not one of my favorite episodes, but it's still a good episode. It's a good start. It deals with the Freemans and them adjusting to new perspective and a new life in Woodcrest, this glitzy, ritzy, rich neighborhood. And Granddad Robert, he's invited to a garden party by this ruthless tycoon Ed Wunsler, and he's trying to get his grandsons to, not embarrass him at the party, but predictably, a lot of shenanigans do ensue. And this is a good episode when it comes to its commentary on how certain elites and certain people look at not only necessarily African Americans when it comes to them visiting or appearing in their environment, um, but to anyone who's in that kind of predicament, and it does it in a way that's definitely thought provoking. That you can go out there and you can be educated and you can uh, uh, really enunciate and speak very clearly and really showcase your views on politics and other things about society in a way that is very lucid and very effective and very efficient. But because you're not a part of a certain social status, they're just gonna they're not gonna be impressed by it. In fact, they're gonna treat you more like you're just some kind of almost like a circus sideshow sort of thing, where it's like, oh, good for you, or they clap for everything that you do, even though you're insulting them to their face. They're still going to be clapping because that's the place that they are positioned in when it comes to their part in society. And the contrast between Charles Wunsler, no, I don't think is it Charles Wunsler? No, Ed Wunsler. Sorry, it's Charlie Murphy who voices that character. But yeah, you have Ed Wunsler III, who, a lot of ways, is what you might consider to be a stereotypical um, uneducated criminal, and the contrast between him and his father is pretty distinct. And there's some great jabs there when it comes to some social commentary where even his father's like, yeah, he's an idiot, but you know what, he's gonna be president someday. Which it's definitely a jab at George W. Bush. In fact, the characters of Ed Wunsler III and Jen Rummy are supposed to be like young Bush and what was it? Was it young Donald Rumsfeld or was it young Cheney? It was like one of those two, which I thought was pretty clever. And yeah, this is a good episode in terms of establishing the setting, establishing the characters and their dynamic with one another, and then just you know getting things in a spot where you're comfortable and you know what's going on and you get the gist of what the show is trying to go for. Like you get that from the opening sequence, by the way, when it comes to this episode, which I find to be absolutely hilarious. It's a dream that Huey has that when he reveals what he considers to be the truth, it causes all these white rich socialites to completely lose their minds and flip their shit. Um, but yeah, it's a good start for sure. Not one of my favorites, but still good start to the season. Episode 2 is called "The Trial of R. Kelly," and this one, at the time, this was a pretty big story. It was the R. Kelly trial involving him urinating on an underage girl, and the writers for this episode, they had no idea about the future historical context when it comes to the fact that many years later, R. Kelly would be involved in another trial because he was doing some inappropriate things to underage or just women in general. And so it enables this episode to actually be the opposite of what some episodes like this that are dealing with topical material. It actually enables it to be just as topical as it was back when it first aired because of the fact that R. Kelly just couldn't help himself and continued to be a scumbag. And what I really like about this episode is the writing because it really showcases not just specifically how foolish it is for African Americans to side with a rapper or somebody in the media who they idolize, but also to just the public in general. I think it's something that a lot of people can connect with and definitely grasp, and just how dangerous the mob mentality can be when it comes to people just not wanting to admit that somebody that they like who makes things that they consume is a piece of shit and they shouldn't be idolized and they shouldn't be cheered on and that we shouldn't treat them as not necessarily gods, but we shouldn't treat them as people who are above reproach or beyond reproach. And I really liked the way that the script handled that. He has evidence that is just it just plainly shows that he pissed on an underage girl. But you have all these people who are like, it doesn't matter. He makes good music, and I like him. But he peed on an underage girl. Like this is wrong. And you even have like this his defense attorney who has this whole spiel about society urinated on R. Kelly. And you're just like, it's just it's genuinely funny, but in a very twisted way. And Adam West is just amazing as R. Kelly's lawyer with his deadpan. But yeah, that's a great episode. Episode 3 is called Guess Hoes Coming to Dinner, which is a take on Guess Who's Coming to Dinner, a film. I think that's the one that starts Sidney Poitier, and this one deals with Robert Grandad, who's lonely. He's trying to find another woman in his life because I think it's insinuated that maybe he might have been married at one point, but then there was a divorce or he lost his wife. And so he's trying to, get back on the saddle, so to speak, and find a woman. And he's at the supermarket and runs into this girl who's scantily clad and dressing like a thought. And he just it becomes smitten with her to the point where he becomes a simp. And this is a great episode when it comes to showcasing the dangers of simping. And if you're a simp, like, you can get taken advantage of. And that's what happens with Granddad. He becomes a simp for Cristal to the point where he's blinded to the fact that she's a hoe. And she's obviously a hoe. Like, it's not even like, it's not even subtle. Like, she's clearly a hoe. So much of a hoe that she should have hoe stamped on her forehead. And he just doesn't see that. And even his grandkids are trying to tell him, like, hey, Granddad, she's a hoe. Yeah. And he's like, no, 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 no. She's just a nice lady. She loves me. But she's just taking advantage of him. She's going shopping all the time. And it's not until her pimp actually shows up to his house looking for her that he starts to really put things together because he's so blinded by her beauty. and by, the favors that she was giving him, and so on and so forth. And this is also a really well written episode and really funny, because just the sheer obliviousness of Granddad when it comes to this woman being a hoe is just really uproarious, because the two grandkids, or maybe it's just Huey, they decide to go undercover and get evidence to show to Granddad that she's a hoe. Like, they got like photos of her soliciting other people and all this other stuff, and going into a club and running out, and just doing all these things that hoe, or a street walker would be doing. And they present the evidence to him, and he's all like, "This is photoshopped." So you're just like, oh man. And I like that it still has that heart to it too. Like, it's dealing with like the objectifying of, women and streetwalkers and so on and so forth, but it also has a lot of heart to it, and also has a pretty balanced take on that lifestyle, where it talks about uh, uh, how it can be something that women feel trapped in, how you can have women who, due to their choices in life, they're not necessarily comfortable with, nor do they want to break away from the safety and security that they get from being being a hoe, or being somebody's um whore, so to speak. Because it's one of those things where, by being a hooker and then having a pimp, they have um, a pretty consistent amount of money that they're able to have access to, certain amount of security, and they could have an opportunity to get a real job and move away from that life. But there are some women who, when given that opportunity, they would rather go back to being on the street and working for their pimp. And that's what happens with Cristal. She's running for her pimp by the end of the episode, um, even though he's driving away from her, because she does not want the responsibility of being an adult. She does not want the responsibility, or um, trials that would come with trying to get just a real job, and to get an education. And so that was something that I definitely did feel really made that episode have a lot more resonance. Um, Episode 4 is called Granddad's Fight, and this one does a great job in terms of detailing certain aspects of toxic masculinity, as well as toxic elements of, of some ways that African Americans handle certain situations with one another. Uh, I'm not gonna say what it is, but it's a particular kind of moment. So you know what it is if you've seen this episode, and it deals with Robert, who's humiliated when he loses a fight to this old blind man who's just an absolute prick, and this is a serious blow to his ego, and so he wants a rematch. And he's also really pushed towards this by Riley, because Riley wants to use the opportunity of a rematch to make some money, because that's the kind of kid that Riley is. And there's all this media coverage, and they're all talking about this rematch between Robert and Stinkmeaner. And Riley even has made like posters, Granddad versus Stinkmeaner. And Huey, he thinks that the old man is a highly skilled blind warrior, because he's still a kid and he still has these fantasies and stuff like that, connected to other things of media that he's seen, probably some anime or some kind of old movie dealing with martial arts, like a Shaolin martial arts kind of movie. And so he has a dream one night that Stinkmeaner is some kind of blind swordsman, and he's trying to fight Stinkmeaner and he's failing. And he then decides, well, I've got to get my granddad prepared for this talented, this deadly blind warrior. So he puts Robert through a lot of intense training. Uncle Ruckus is involved to help with the training process, and that's where you get like Eye of the Tiger by Survivor and stuff like that. And throughout all of this, though, Granddad comes to the realization at a certain point that he was just a feeble old man who got lucky when it comes to the confrontation the first time, where Granddad just kind of happened to just trip, either over his own feet, or the old man just happened to get his foot out just in the right time, sent Granddad on the ground. So then Stinkmeaner was able to hit him with his cane and his knee. And sadly, though, he doesn't come to this realization until it's too late, where now he's in the fight with Stinkmeaner, and he beats him so badly that he actually ultimately kills the old man. And like that that was something I definitely didn't see coming, and there's a lot of stuff like that throughout this season where you're like, okay, this show doesn't mess around. Like, it's not afraid to really go for the highest amount of impact. And what better way to showcase the dangers of just being foolish when it comes to being involved in some sort of confrontation with somebody, or having some sort of butting of heads involving the male ego, than you killing somebody. Like, maybe you shouldn't fall for those kind of moments. Just let it go. Fight for something else that actually means something in the end. And it's not just the messages are really good in this, but it's just got great animation. Like, I love the sequences uh uh where Huey is dreaming about the blind swordsman, and like those sequences are spectacular. And episode 5 is called A Date with a Health Inspector. This one deals with Tom, who's arrested on suspicion of murder. And this one, it, it, it details a lot of stuff involving how African Americans are profiled and they are singled out as suspects in a lot of crimes, even when they're innocent. And that's sadly, genuinely a real thing. And it also talks about how ridiculous it is to have this constant fear of being anally raped, and how like fear of something like that or something similar to that can be very destructive when it comes to your relationship with your family. Because that's what's happening with Tom, is that he's so because he's so scared of anal rape, which I understand. Like, his worst fear is being raped in prison, because he saw like some kind of prison movie when he was a kid and there was an anal rape scene in it. And so now, like, he's always freaked out about anal rape, even when it doesn't necessarily fit within the context of a situation. So that leads to actually some pretty funny, awkward moments of humor throughout this episode, where he's recollecting different situations and scenarios in his life. And when he decided to do something else, or not, he decided not to break the law, not to smoke the joint, not to be involved in something that could potentially get him in trouble. Because, like, oh yeah, you guys have fun. I'm gonna pass because I don't want to be anally raped. Like you're just like, it's ridiculous. But the writing is very clear that it is very ridiculous. And this is where you get Ed Wunsler III and Jen Rami making their first appearance, and Riley helps uh, teams up with them to try to help Tom uh, get out of prison, try to make it so they find the real killer. And it's a good example of how easy it can be sometimes to find the real criminal, but instead, like, the police would just rather just frame somebody instead, or try to get somebody to confess to a crime they didn't commit, instead of putting in the work to actually getting the real killer. And that's something that's definitely very sobering. But I appreciated the writers in terms of them actually willing to go there with this episode, because all Riley did, or Huey did, like, all that happens, they talk to some people in the neighborhood and figured out who the killer is. But the police couldn't do that for some reason. They just decided this black man, who is a well respected official, who seemingly is a pillar of his community. Now he must have done it. He must have been the Xbox killer. um, and of course you got just the shenanigans with Ed Onler III and Jin Rami, and just their whole shtick is just really funny, and how they are just focusing on the completely wrong things instead of trying to find the killer. And I believe this is also the episode where they get involved in a shootout at a 7-Eleven. I think this is the episode where that happens. Yeah, they get involved in the shootout at a 7-Eleven, and they are just being completely just genuinely racist towards this shopkeeper, and they're trying to rob this shop, but somehow their racist assumptions about his character and him being a terrorist actually turns out to be true. And so then they get involved in a shootout and, like, take out some terrorists who were hiding out at the local 7-Eleven, and so now they're considered to be patriots and heroes by the end of the episode, despite them trying to literally hold up the 7-Eleven or the convenience store. It's probably not the 7-Eleven, it's a convenience store, but you get what I mean. And I was like, that is some biting satire right there. And that's totally true. Like, that's exactly what the media would have done if something like that happened. They'd be like, "Oh, they're heroes." Like, never mind the fact that they tried to rob this convenience store, just because it was coincidence that the people who ran it actually happened to be terrorists. They're heroes. All right, okay, whatever you say. And eventually, the Tom is let go because he was never guilty of the crime, because the Xbox killer killed again while he was being interrogated, or he was incarcerated. Um, Now episode 6 is called "The Story of Gangsta Delicious." This one is more of like a satire about rap, uh, and specifically rappers when it comes to their front, their facade, when it comes to their personalities and who they are. That a lot of them have this persona that is not even actually accurate to who they really are, and how that can be pretty destructive, and definitely something that can be problematic in the long run. And all of that being said, I wasn't a super big fan of this episode. Like, this first episode where I was like, okay, that was just kind of there. Um, I think a large part is because Huey's, like, barely even utilized at all in it, and sometimes that can work. Like the Bob Ross parody episode when Huey is doing art classes and stuff. Like, I mean, not Huey, Riley. When Riley's doing art classes with this Bob Ross guy. But Most of the time, though, when it's not equally sort of as focused on Huey and Riley or them being together, it's not as strong when it comes to the quality of the writing or the episode in general. And like, the whole stuff with Gangstalicious and him getting shot over and over again, I don't know, I didn't really find it to be that funny. And then you did this whole stuff at the end where all of a sudden it's revealed that he's gay. But I did appreciate the fact that they didn't really try to make that like into some kind of big deal. But it also kind of came across like a little bit out of the blue. Like it didn't even feel like it was anything that really said that much about his character or anything. Just kind of surface level stuff, maybe about how you shouldn't assume that the certain rapper is tough and wants all the bitches. Like they actually might be interested in something else. Their sexuality might be completely different, but I don't. It just really didn't click that well for me. And yeah, he learns about the meaning of the song "Thug in Love," which is Gangstalicious' big hit song, and there's a lot of stuff where saying Gangstalicious is at the hospital, and Riley wants to go to the hospital to see him, and then the people who shot Gangstalicious are trying to shoot him again, and it's just, I don't know. I just thought it was okay. Um, Episode seven's, in my opinion, kind of another one that was just kind of there. Like I understand what this episode is trying to go for, but there are some good moments in it. But I'm not a super big fan of episodes that are more like the holiday episode. So this is called a Huey Freeman Christmas, and this is the Christmas episode. And Huey's given creative control over his school's Christmas play, and because he's a radical when it comes to his political beliefs, he decides to make the play into something like that. He's going to have it focus on Black Jesus. That causes a lot of controversy, and I do like the writing when it comes to it approaching a discussion about how certain kinds of social commentary are frowned upon or are considered to be too edgy for certain people in the industry, and so they would rather you change that but keep everything else. But they can't have Jesus be black. That's too controversial. Well, we like everything else, but you can't do that. And I appreciated that when it comes to the script. It didn't hold back when it comes to how just absurd that is. And it talked about how all these different actors and actresses that he was able to get for this play. He even got Quincy Jones to produce it because he knew Quincy, and fired the original actors for the play, which were the kids, because they weren't good enough. And it does show that Riley, well, not Riley, I mean Huey, because Riley, the reason why I mentioned Riley because he was on my brain, because Riley's whole part in this episode is one of the worst aspects of this episode. So you have Huey and him struggling with his vision and not really knowing when to compromise. And it ultimately ends in the play never being really seen by anybody. It gets made and his vision is uncompromised, but his teacher winds up losing his job. There's all these effects that come from it, and it just kind of shows the fertility and just how sometimes you might want to make a compromise when it comes to your vision because otherwise no one's going to see it. And how can somebody learn from your vision or from what you're trying to say about society from your perspective if you're not willing to, work around some things? But it also shows that maybe fame or maybe showcasing that particular vision is bigger and is more important than having it seen by other people and having it have more of a wide appeal. So it has what you might consider maybe to be a conflicting message, but I think it's a very realistic message because it showcases both sides of when you decide to make a decision like that. When you make something that's based on your vision and comes from uh, the heart and your soul, and what compromises are you going to make? What are you willing to sacrifice if you don't decide to make more compromises? And the consequences of that. But with Riley, there's this whole subplot about him just shooting Santa Claus with a pellet gun repeatedly and terrorizing him. It's like, give me my, you pay me what you owe, and I'm like, what? What is Santa Claus supposed to pay you? What 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 does he owe you? Like it just felt like I just felt like it was a random thing. I didn't really understand what it was trying to say. If it was trying to be some sort of social commentary bit, I didn't get it. I mean, I got the whole thing with a Jasmine and her, thinking that Christmas is all about praising Santa. Like I got that, but I didn't really get the whole thing with Riley. I felt that was just forced and just weird and didn't really fit with anything else. And that whole stuff with Riley is one of the reasons why I wasn't super big on the episode. But I did like other moments though in it, like when Uncle Ruckus actually has a moment where he's not a totally complete and utter asshole, where he manages to talk to Jasmine after Riley, was telling her that Santa isn't real, and he manages to soothe her a little bit in his way, but he still manages to, get her to cheer up, which that was a surprising bit of extra character that I did not expect when it comes to Uncle Ruckus. But it's still not one of my favorite episodes of season 1. Episode 8 is called A Real. I love this episode. This episode's a biting satire of the just ridiculous nature of reality television, complete with interviews of the various different main characters in the show in reality TV style, and so Robert takes the advice of Riley to just fake it in order to get all this free shit from those reality shows because they're all about drama and stories. So he gets Robert to pretend to be blind to get his ride pimped on Pimp My Ride, and then Extreme Makeover, the home edition, then shows up, and they're gonna try to add a new wing to the house. And you have this other subplot with Huey where he's being stalked by a secret agent, but really it's his paranoia that's playing tricks on him, and that adds a nice extra layer to the episode that I really liked. That really makes you think about the dangers of letting your paranoia really get away from you. And but yeah, the reality TV stuff is just hilarious. Like the the social commentary with the extreme home makeover stuff was really brilliant. I mean, they're even the way that they're trying to remodel the house into like an urban look, and it's so stereotypical that it's genuinely funny. Their beds have hydraulics in them. They're trying to put up like a massive painting of Aunt Jemima. Like it's bad. It's so tacky, but that's the kind of stuff that reality shows do. And just I loved how this episode pointed out the hypocrisy of reality TV, especially the ones where they're being generous and they're giving you a gift. They're giving you a gift of a new home, but they're doing it by ruining your current home. And episode 9 is called The Return of the King. This one is probably one of the most controversial episodes. This is an episode where it's all a dream. It's a dream of Huey's, and for some people, you might consider it to be a nightmare. where it deals with a hypothetical scenario that centers on Martin Luther King Jr. if he wakes up from a coma after 32 years, and he's now thrust into, at the time of the airing, current society. And it's a completely different world. It's post 9/11, and so he winds up becoming ostracized by society because of the fact that he doesn't want to be involved in a war on terror, and he'd rather take a more nonviolent approach. And this was just an incredible episode when it comes to the quality of the writing, because it was just so damn accurate. Like, this is exactly what would have happened. Because Martin Luther King Jr., in a lot of ways, he is a pacifist. So he would not have been advocating for, going to Iraq and going down there and trying to find bin Laden and shooting him in the head and the whole war on terror thing. That wouldn't be his thing. He would apply his philosophy of peace to terrorism. And sadly, because of how heated things were politically, that would have caused him to be ostracized. This is where Huey gets involved and then motivates Dr. King to revive the civil rights movement by creating a new revolution party, a black revolution party. But then that completely gets turned on its head, because then it becomes like a party, sponsored by a radio station. And now it's just a bunch of people acting stupid, drinking and partying and dancing. And that's where you have this controversial part of the episode where Martin Luther King Jr. speaks up and just tells people to stop being ignorant. And yeah, he says the N-word a lot, but it's even despite that, like, it's a very a good message. And honestly, I think it's a good message for all races. Like, yeah, stop being ignorant. Like, stop being ignorant and dumb. Like, focus on the things that actually matter in life. And then he moves to Canada because he's like, I'm done with this shit. But his message rings true with the people who were there at the party, and then it gets spread, and then it causes a new revolution. And the end of the episode is a whole army of army maybe isn't the right word, but a whole mass of African Americans marching towards the White House, and then you get a newspaper that says that Oprah was voted in as president of the United States. Definitely the most thought-provoking episode of the season, but I really liked it. There were some genuinely funny bits, some great social satire and commentary. Kevin Michael Richardson did a really good job voicing MLK. Yeah, I definitely say it's one of my favorites from season 1. Episode 10 is called the Itis. I like this one quite a bit too. This is a great episode in terms of detailing how business people will manipulate and take advantage of other people in order to get something that they want more. So they'll say certain things, they'll give you an opportunity to run your own restaurant, but really what it is a setup. It's a setup so that things will go spectacularly awry, or things will get to the point where the restaurant will have to close. But because of the controversy and because of things that have occurred because of the restaurant and because of its controversial nature, it'll drive the price down on certain things and properties around the restaurant, and it'll make it easier for the businessman or the tycoon to buy that park that he's been trying to get, but the city won't budge on a certain price. So that's really what the core of this episode is, because Ed Wunsler just he manipulates and uses Robert. He gets him to open a soul food restaurant called the Itis. The business is extremely popular at first, but it starts to have a corrosive effect on the neighborhood. And Wunsler was aware of that, because that was his whole plan all along. And I like that this episode points out the hypocrisy of Robert, him opening the soul food restaurant when he had really hasn't cooked that much soul food in his life, but now he's trying to act like he's some sort of soul food master. It points out how ridiculous the movie Soul Food is, which I find to be a hilarious clip. Definitely one of the funniest clips in the season. If you know the context, if you've seen the movie Soul Food, you're like, yeah, that is pretty fucked up when you think about it. And just the absurdity of the different foods that he was serving at the Itis. And also the connection that the Itis food has with drugs, with people getting addicted to it, and showing the aftermath of addiction. And that was pretty harrowing, actually. There's some pretty scary, like, honestly, kind of disturbing moments in this episode. But I really liked it. It was good. And episode 11 is Let's Nab Oprah, classic. This one deals with Riley, Ed Onler III, and Jen Rummy. They decide to try to kidnap Oprah Winfrey. But, Ed Onler III and Jen Rummy are a bunch of blockheads, so Riley's the one that's doing most of the work. But Huey hears about the plan, then tries to stop it. And that's where you have this bodyguard for Oprah, who is, by all intents and purposes, Jim Kelly, for Black Belt Jones. And so it was fun to see like a little homage to Jim Kelly. And this has some great stuff, like some really good bits of animation in it, and just some really hilarious moments where they kidnap the wrong woman at a completely different bookstore. They kidnap Maya Angelou instead of Oprah. Then they have this whole elaborate plan to kidnap Oprah at the taping of her show, and instead they wind up in the dressing room of Bill Cosby. And this is the moment where Riley's like, "I'm out of here. You guys are a bunch of idiots." And then Charles Onler III and Jen Rummy are like, "Well, I don't know. Bill Cosby's right here. Let's just kidnap him." And then, like 15 minutes later, they return him back because he was just too annoying. Yeah, this is just a classic episode. There's so many great bits in this, especially between Charlie Murphy and Sam Jackson. Um, I would say that might be like the funniest episode of season 1. Now, episode 12 is called Riley Was Here. I really like this episode. I think this is honestly a pretty underrated episode. It's not quite as laugh out loud funny as the previous one, but it makes up for it when it comes to the quality of the script. So Riley, he gets caught painting graffiti on a house. He was influenced to make the graffiti larger and to redo it and make his name clear by this guy who was there, who clearly is meant to be a Bob Ross type. And he winds up getting coerced to take art lessons by granddad. And his teacher is actually the same guy. And so what happens is there's this bond that forms between Riley and this art teacher that is really sweet and genuinely charming. And Riley, he starts doing spray paint art that is just wowing the neighborhood. And he then is wanting to take credit for it. And when he does take credit for it in front of all these people who are looking at his art, they don't believe him. They're like, no, there's no way that you did it. Who's the real artist? They're laughing at him. And that upsets him. Even his grandfather doesn't believe him, which upsets him even more. But that leads him to doing something that is just so heartwarming, where he decides to find a photo of, I believe, his mom and dad when they got married. And he does a spray painted art piece of his mom and dad on the house, on Granddad's house. And it's a genuinely just awesome moment when it comes to the show, and just anything really. It's just such a great heartwarming moment. uh, after there was some kind of car chase and Bob Ross is firing a gun and he left and was now a fugitive. Um, and yeah, he was technically breaking law. He was spray painting and vandalism. But there's a lot of themes. There's a lot of commentary in this episode that really is quite uh, um, strong. But it's the heart and the soul of it that just really makes it stand out. There's some other extra social commentary with Huey where he's watching black television because he's trying to see what kind of effects it has on him, and it just makes him dumber and dumber. Um, that was pretty good. But the strength of that episode is the the subplot with, well, no, it's the main plot. The main plot with Riley and this art teacher and him showing that to his granddad that he is a talented artist, and also that he's not a complete and total screw up. But even after that great moment where he does the painting, even granddad's like, you gotta clean that up, like clean that, take that off the house. It's like, but granddad's like, no, I can't. Like, what are you doing? It's still graffiti, you know. So yeah, that was a good episode. Episode 13 is called Wingmen. This one deals with granddad, and he was asked to give a eulogy in Chicago for his friend Mo from World War II, and they even show like a sequence involving granddad where he's in this plane and Mo's there with him, and Mo's taking all his credit and acting like a total hotshot, but he doesn't know what the hell he's doing. Granddad is doing all the work in the dogfight, and Mo actually winds up shooting Granddad, and he's just obnoxiously over the top in terms of how much of a badass he is when he's the complete opposite. And understandably so, he had a falling out with Mo, and he's reluctantly agrees to do this eulogy. And this is also an opportunity for Huey to reconnect with his old friend Cairo. And this is a good episode in terms of showing how relationships, they can either be damaged beyond repair, or they can be damaged in ways that are just solely due to a decision that you decide to make in life, and how damaging that can be. Because even despite everything that Mo has done to Robert, him taking credit for his accomplishments, him even going as far as taking one of his medals, he let go of this friendship with Mo because of he was with this other woman that there was no guarantee that they were ever going to be close with one another, or ever really be wife, wife, you would never going to be like husband and wife, that kind of thing. There was never really anything that was guaranteed. And he completely just destroyed his relationship and his friendship with Mo because of something that was just so petty. And yeah, Mo pranked him from beyond the grave with D's nuts, but it was still one of those things where Granddad realizes, despite everything that Mo did and despite everything, all the stuff that Mo does that he doesn't agree with, he was still his friend. And so he realizes that, I should have tried harder to keep connecting with Mo and keep him a part of my life. And then it's contrasted with Huey and Cairo, where Cairo was his friend when he was back in Chicago before he moved to, this fancy upscale neighborhood. And he's thinking they would go back to Chicago and he'll just be able to reconcile with his friend, but that's not what happens at all. And it actually leads them to fighting. And then he tries to make amends for that. And then Cairo just kicks his ass again. And, takes the fruit basket that he was going to give to him and basically he might as well have shoved it up Huey's ass, because he was like, "Fuck you and fuck your fruit basket." Just headbutts him, and it just shows you that in life you can't always make things right, but there are opportunities where you can, and if you choose not to, there are consequences for that. And that's what I really liked about that episode, is just the quality of the writing in terms of uh the characterization and just the realness of it. Episode 14 is called The Block is Hot. This is clearly meant to be a take on Do the Right Thing with the heat wave and everything. There's an normally hot winter day is going on. It's like 97 degrees in February, and Jasmine is opening a lemonade stand. Huey is on a soapbox, talking about certain societal issues. It's making people depressed, so then they buy the lemonade. But then Ed Wensler shows up, and now he's like, "Oh, I see an idea here to make a little more money and to stroke my ridiculous ego. So I'm going to take advantage of this little girl, and I'm going to wave a pony in front of her, and I am going to make her sell her lemonade stand business to me and sign this contract in order for her to get a pony, but she's never going to get the pony because I have all this stuff in writing in the fine print that's just going to screw her over, because it's just going to take I'm going to take so much of a percentage of the sales that she's never going to make enough when it comes to selling lemonade to ever get this pony. And then I'm just gonna I'll use that opportunity when everything comes crashing down, because the only employee that's working there is a little girl, and predictably she's not going to be able to handle that responsibility. Then I'm going to come in with my own kind of my own lemonade and take advantage of people that way. But I'm going to say it's cruelty free, because now there's this whole protest that happened because the girl was working and just working around the clock because she's trying to get that pony. And now there's protesters who are like, stop this lemonade stand, stop this cruelty. And then the scrupulous businessman's like, I have cruelty free lemonade for you to buy. This is just a great satire of greed and capitalism. It really was, with a girl's lemonade stand in between it all. And it also had a really sweet moment between Huey and Jasmine, where Jasmine, throughout this episode, because she wants that pony, is just refusing to listen to Huey. And when it comes to him telling her that she's being taken advantage of, and after the heat wave is over and it starts snowing and now it's cold, Jasmine is shivering, and this is all after the lemonade stand business completely crashes and burns. Huey winds up giving her his scarf. So it shows that the two of them still care for one another. And I really like that moment. Now, episode 15 is called The Passion of Reverend Ruckus. And this one, this is definitely a controversial episode. So this one deals with Uncle Ruckus having a dream about white heaven, complete with Ronald Reagan and a scene where he looks in a fountain and he's white. Because the whole character of Uncle Ruckus is that he's an African American who wishes he was a white guy, which is something that actually does happen in that community. Happens in a lot of other communities involving people of different races. And he then, because of the fact that he's also diagnosed with cancer, he decides to dedicate the remainder of his life to preaching about white heaven. And he does that by getting people to love the white man. And white Jesus in particular. And because he's charismatic and because he's very outspoken when it comes to his beliefs, even as deluded and as crazy as they are, he actually winds up getting a significant audience of people. He's getting books that are sold, gets a guy who has some money and influence and power in the community to tag along with him, be a supporter, support his cause. He's now selling out arenas. And Granddad is like, well, I got to put a stop to this because Ruckus is acting a fool. And he's spreading dangerous rhetoric. Huey, he's trying to find a way to free a friend of his who was wrongly imprisoned for murder. And the way that it showcases that he was completely innocent in a way where the evidence was all there and it was even marked properly is pretty hilarious. It's a great bit of satire. And despite everything, all the evidence suggests that this man didn't do it. He's still slated to die by the electric chair. And so Huey's trying to find a way to save him. He has this a plan in his head. He envisions where it's gonna be like a Mission Impossible sort of thing, where he'll sneak in and he'll take out the guards and he'll have this whole setup that will enable him to be able to save his friend and break him out of jail. And he's even willing to sacrifice everything to do this. He's willing to sacrifice his life. He's willing to go to jail to save this friend of his. But what happens is Uncle Ruckus, he's causing a ruckus, no pun intended. And he basically instigates a fight between like everybody in the church who showed up to hear the word of white Jesus. And like just everybody's just beating the crap out of each other because he's like, hey, you need to hit your fellow black man and essentially smack the blackness out of him. And it's causing an absolute riot. And he's talking about, if I'm wrong, may God strike me down. And then he gets struck with lightning. And that also makes it so the power goes out. So the innocent man's not electrocuted. And this is all after Huey, he was not able to enact his plan to save him because Granddad needed the car to go to Uncle Ruckus's sermon. And he couldn't save his friend because he can't get a ride, which really does hammer home that despite his ideals and his lofty visions, Huey's still a kid. And he prays to the God that he doesn't even necessarily believe in to save his friend. Ruckus gets struck by lightning. The power grid goes out temporarily, makes it so the electric chair doesn't actually fry the Huey's friend who's innocent. And then the last ditch plan that Huey did, where he just sent a bunch of random blackmail notes about some senator having a gay lover, actually did pan out. And they got the call from the governor, and his friend is going to be free, or at least taken off of death row. And the end of the episode is quite strong because it ties up a lot of different arcs all at once and still leaves questions. It still leaves you with a genuine sense of excitement in terms of where things are going to lead next. There's a great, sweet, heartfelt moment between Huey and Jasmine that essentially concludes the episode and the season. And yeah, I know this is like, wow, it's like an hour and 14 minutes. That's a long, it's 15 episodes. There's a lot to say about this show, a lot to say about its themes, about the commentary. So honestly, I feel like the extended length is actually something that I feel is more than acceptable when it comes to discussing the Boondocks. And yeah, I would definitely recommend checking out this show sometime if you haven't seen it already, especially if it sounds interesting to you. I think the first season is genuinely excellent. I think it's great. There's like 2 episodes that I thought were just kind of okay, but they were still watchable. The rest of the episodes ranged from like good to great. So, yeah, that's my review of season 1 of the Boondocks. And as always, thanks for watching, and I'll see you later. See ya.